I'm 73 now, and some mornings I wake up surprised that the world is still here, still moving, still asking things of me. My hands don't work the way they used to. My knees complain before my mind is fully awake. And yet, there's a strange clarity that comes with age. Not the kind you get from books or podcasts, but the kind that settles in after decades of living, failing, loving, and losing. It took me more than half a century to understand something that now feels painfully obvious. And when I look back, what hurts isn't just the mistakes I made. It's how long it took me to see them for what they were. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew your name and your business. My father worked with his hands. My mother worked with her patience. They didn't talk much about feelings. Life was about doing what needed to be done, keeping your head down, and not complaining. I learned early that being useful mattered more than being honest about how you felt. So I became good at showing up, working hard, and staying quiet. People praised me for it. Teachers said I was dependable. Bosses said I was reliable. Inside, I thought that must mean I was doing life right. In my 20s, I was always in a hurry. A hurry to prove myself, to earn more, to be taken seriously. I thought life was a ladder, and if I climbed fast enough, I'd eventually reach a place where everything made sense. I skipped dinners, missed birthdays, and told myself I'd make it up later. I believed there would be time. There's a special kind of confidence young people have, the belief that the future is wide open and forgiving. I had that confidence, and it kept me blind. I married young. She was kind, smarter than me, and far more patient. She tried to talk to me about things that made me uncomfortable, about how distant I was, how I listened with my body but not my heart. I'd nod, promise to do better, and then go right back to the same patterns. I thought providing was the same as caring. I thought showing up physically was enough. I didn't realize that being present is an entirely different thing. By the time I was in my 30s, I had what most people would call a good life. Steady job, house in the suburbs, kids who were healthy. On the outside, it looked like success. On the inside, I was exhausted and restless. I kept telling myself that once I reached the next milestone, I'd finally relax. Once the promotion came, once the mortgage felt lighter, once the kids were older, I kept postponing peace like it was an appointment I could reschedule indefinitely. The first real crack came quietly. My father died without warning. One phone call, one hospital room, and suddenly a man who had always seemed permanent was gone. I remember standing there, listening to the machines, thinking about all the conversations we never had, all the questions I never asked because I assumed there would be time. That was the first moment I felt it, that subtle fear that maybe time wasn't as generous as I believed. But even then, I didn't change. I felt it, acknowledged it, and then buried it under routine. Life kept moving. The kids grew. My marriage slowly thinned out, not from one big explosion, but from years of small neglects. We became polite roommates instead of partners. When she finally said she couldn't do it anymore, I was shocked, even though I shouldn't have been. I had been there, but I hadn't really been there. I thought love was durable enough to survive inattention. I was wrong. The divorce forced me to sit alone with myself for the first time. No noise, no distractions, no one to blame. Just long evenings and a mirror that felt increasingly honest. I told myself it was just a rough chapter, that I'd bounce back, that this wasn't the lesson everyone talks about. But deep down, I knew something was off. I was living reactively, always responding, never choosing. My life was full, but it wasn't intentional. In my 40s, I doubled down on work. It felt safer than introspection. Work had rules. Effort led to results. Emotions didn't factor into performance reviews. I became good at my job, very good. People came to me for advice. Younger coworkers admired my discipline. If they only knew how much of it was fear disguised as productivity, fear of slowing down, fear of asking the wrong questions, Fear of realizing I'd been chasing the wrong things. The real lesson didn't arrive with drama. It came one ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in my car after work, engine off, radio silent, just staring at the steering wheel. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Not physically tired, spiritually tired. I realized I had been living on autopilot for decades, measuring my life by external markers while ignoring the quiet signals inside me. I'd been postponing my own life, waiting for permission that was never coming. That was the beginning, not the end. Understanding something and living it are very different. It took years to unlearn the idea that my worth was tied to my output. Years to accept that slowing down didn't mean giving up. Years to realize that discomfort isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's an invitation. I started saying no to things that drained me, even when it confused people. I started listening more, especially when it made me uncomfortable. By the time I reached my 50s, I could finally admit the truth to myself. The biggest mistake I made wasn't a specific decision or failure. It was how long I waited to be honest about what mattered to me. I lived as if my real life would start later, after obligations, after expectations, after approval. I didn't realize that later has a way of turning into never if you're not careful. I tried to repair what I could. Some relationships welcomed the change. Others had already moved on. That was another lesson. Not everything can be fixed once enough time has passed. Regret isn't loud. It's quiet. It shows up when you're alone, when the house is still, when there's nothing left to distract you. You don't feel it all at once. It settles in slowly, like dust. Now in my 70s, my days are simpler. I wake up early, not because I have to, but because my body does. I drink my coffee slowly. I notice things I used to rush past. Light through the window, the sound of birds, conversations that don't need an agenda. I wish I could say I live without regret, but that wouldn't be honest. What I can say is that I finally understand it. What took me so long to learn is this: life doesn't reward waiting. It responds to attention. The moments that shape you aren't always the big ones. They're the small choices you repeat without questioning. Choosing to listen instead of interrupt. Choosing to rest instead of prove. Choosing to be honest instead of agreeable. These choices don't feel dramatic at the time, but they accumulate. They become your life. If you're younger than me, you still have something incredibly valuable, whether you realize it or not. You have flexibility. You can change direction without everything breaking. You can ask hard questions and still have time to live the answers. Don't make the mistake I did by assuming clarity comes later. It comes when you're willing to sit still long enough to hear yourself. I spent too many years chasing a version of success that looked good from the outside and felt empty on the inside. I thought fulfillment was something you earned after suffering enough. It isn't. It's something you practice, quietly, daily, without applause. At 73, I don't have grand ambitions anymore. What I have is presence. And I've learned, a little late but deeply, that presence is the real currency of a meaningful life. I can't go back and reclaim the decades I rushed through. But I can tell you this with certainty: don't wait 50 years to pay attention. Don't assume you'll figure it out later. Later is not guaranteed. What you have is now, and now is more than enough if you're willing to live inside it.